We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Hilchot Shabbat, and we are starting Siman Resh Tzadivav, the halachot of Havdalah. After the davening, we spoke about the private and also the communal Shaliach Tzibur's elements of Havdalah in the previous two Simanim. Now we're going to discuss the Havdalah that everyone makes on a cup of wine after Shabbat. Seder Havdalah, Yayin Besamim Ner Havdalah. We do a number of things in our Havdalah that we say on a cup of wine, and the order of them is Yayin, the bracha of Borei Pri HaGefen, then Besamim, then Ner, which means the bracha of Borei Meoreh HaEsh, and only then the bracha of actual Havdalah, ben Kodesh L'Chor, ben Or L'Choshech, ben Yisrael Amim, and that would be the final, which is the main bracha that we say. So those four elements that we have in Havdalah are in that order. Everything important that we do has been instituted to be said on a cup of wine. Like that, therefore, the bracha of when you have Brit Milah, it's said on a cup of wine. When you have Birkat Irusin, it's cup of wine. Birkat Nisuin, nowadays we do it together in the same setting, but Birkat Nisuin is on a cup of wine. Kiddush is on a cup of wine. Havdalah is on a cup of wine, and so on and so forth. That is the anything that carries an importance, and you have a set of brachot said, and therefore you say the bracha of Gefen first. Say the bracha of Borei Pri HaGefen first. Then you have the bracha of Besamim, which is coming to compensate for the Tosefet Neshama of Shabbat. Hence, on Yom Tov, which you don't lose, there's no compensation needed because you don't lose the Tosefet Neshama, so to speak, of Yom Tov. There's no bracha of Besamim. And then you have, of course, the bracha of Borei Meoreh HaEsh on Shabbat, because on Shabbat you cannot use any fire. Even already existing fire you can't use. There's no usage of a fire. You can't work with fire, so to speak. And therefore, on Motzei Shabbat, you have this and commemoration also for the fact that the Midrash tells us Adam HaRishon figured out the power and the usage of fire on Motzei Shabbat immediately after the creation. So that's an element of commemoration there as well. Which makes the difference. These two reasons make the difference of Yom Tov and Yom Kippur. Why we do what we do. On Yom Tov, there is no bracha of Meoreh HaEsh because we can use fire on Yom Tov. You just can't you can't create a new fire, but an already existing fire for purposes of Oneg Yom Tov. You want to cook some food and so on Yom Tov, that's fine. As long as you don't strike a match, so to speak, you don't create new fire, you use already existing fire, that will be fine. On Yom Kippur, the reason that we have a fire that has rested over the course of the entire Yom Tov also has to do with this, but for our purposes, those are the three initial ones before we say the actual bracha of Havdalah, Havavdil ben Kodesh L'Chor, ben Or L'Choshech, ben Yisrael Amim, differentiating between Shabbat and weekdays. And that, of course, as we discuss in Siman Resh Ayin Aleph, comes from the fact that it's the Kiddush. You have to make Shabbat, sanctify Shabbat, make it holy. And the way you do it with a dibur is to show the differentiation between Shabbat and the weekdays when Shabbat comes in and when Shabbat goes out. So we have it in the format of Kiddush when Shabbat comes in on Friday night, and we have it in the format of Havdalah when Shabbat ends at the end of Motzei Shabbat. V'simanach yivne. If you want to remember this, yibane or yivne, that's how you remember it. Yayin, besamim, ner, havdalah. Yud, bet, nun, hey. That will be the siman that you will remember, the order of havdalah. V'sarich lizaher shelo yeheh akos pagum. You have to be careful that the cup that you use, the cup of wine that you use, should not be pagum. Pagum means not just that the cup should not be broken or cracked or chipped, but that it should not be used, the cup of wine. If you drink a little bit, you take a sip from the cup, that cup is already used. For Kiddush and Havdalah, we want to make sure that is not the case. You have a fresh, full cup of wine, that is a matter of respect for the mitzvah that you're doing. If a person had taken a sip from, I think you have half a cup of wine, or something that someone has taken a sip from, so you just fill it up, and that is now considered a fresh cup. It's not hard. You don't have to empty it and wash it. You don't have to necessarily do that. You can just fill it up, tip it off, so to speak, and that would be fine as well. Now, the Rambam holds that the mitzvah of Havdalah is a mitzvah d'oraita. Just like Kiddush of Friday night is d'oraita, right? It goes together. This sanctifying Shabbat in the beginning and the end is compared together, and just like the Kiddush of Friday night we've learned already is d'oraita, the Havdalah also would be a mitzvah d'oraita as well, and it is considered part of Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadesho. You're sanctifying with the Zechira, with a mention of sanctification, with a mention of Kiddush. So you do it in the beginning of Shabbat by the means of saying Kiddush, and the end of Shabbat by the means of saying Havdalah. Now, this is how you show that Shabbat is separate from other days in its level of holiness and Kedusha. There are those who say that this is not midoraita, is midivre sofrim. Actually, Harav Magid, the Magid Mishnah on the Rambam, right there and then mentions this in the name of Yesh Mefarshim, and it's brought in Avudraham, in the Sefer Orchot Chaim, and so on. Now, the Magrav Ram earlier on in the halachot of Kiddush, and also later on in Siman Resh Tzaditet, he writes that the Tosafot in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Tet, they also hold like the Rambam that the mitzvah of Havdalah is midoraita, but again, that's a bit debatable. What we're trying to say here is that this is a great machlokas rishonim, and you have one of the greatest names that the Rambam and perhaps the Tosafot that hold is the Oraita. So hence you have to be careful, just like we're more careful and mindful when we talk about mitzvot d'oraita. Here also is one of those things that you want to do it the best way possible, and certainly with the kavanah of Zachoret Yom HaShabbat lekadesho, because that would be the backbone of the mitzvah. And we all know, especially a mitzvah that's d'oraita, mitzvot tzrichot kavanah. A mitzvah needs kavanah. You can't mindlessly do the mitzvah. It's something that you want to do it, recognizing in your mind at the time you do it why this is being done. You know, we've mentioned this several times that Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli, in the first response, in the first shuvah that he has in his Chelek Aleph of Minchat Shlomo, he discusses a fellow that's sitting in the sukkah, and he has no kavanah whatsoever to be in the sukkah. It happens to be Chag HaSukkot, and he happens to be sitting in the sukkah outside eating his seudah, his sandwich with bread, which again, eating bread outside sukkah is prohibited, is asur. And yet, this person is eating the sukkah, but has absolutely no kavanah for being in the sukkah. So Rav Shlomo Yisraeli there discusses whether this person is just not yotzeh, is not fulfilling the mitzvah of being in the sukkah because he's mindless, or maybe it's even worse that he's doing an equivalent of an avirah of eating a seudah outside sukkah, because mitzvot tzrichot kavanah, without kavanah you can't do it. And he concludes that actually, indeed, he will be in transgression of that because of mitzvot tzrichot kavanah. It goes to say how much the mindset of a person, how important the mindset of a person is, and hence again, mitzvah of Havdalah is something that people do as another thing that we do on Motzei Shabbat, just getting out of Shabbat and going our merry ways during the week. It's not like by Kiddush people stand there, they bear in mind, many people actually announce around the Seudah, this is a mitzvah d'oraita, make sure to have in mind, to be yotzeh, and so on. But really, according to the Rambam, the same exact thing is happening on Motzei Shabbat when you say Havdalah, hence a little extra emphasis on mindfulness when it comes to the mitzvah of Havdalah. Now, the Ramah writes, before you do Havdalah in the house, the minhag has evolved that people say the psukim Aviner Yishuati, Efchat, right? Those psukim, all those psukim we say before Havdalah. Again, Ashkenazim have it one way, Sfaradim have it a different way. Generally speaking, when it comes to these things, Sfaradim have like a 9-hour process of long psukim and the Shem Yichuds and all that. Ashkenazim are more short at the point. But nevertheless, every community has to be following their own minhagim. And the Ramah writes that this is the proper thing to do because it's a siman tov. These are psukim that the connotation is positive message of starting with faith and having a great result. Kos Yeshua Desav Shem Hashem Ekra, like the cup of salvation I shall lift. And like so we got Jews are going to have happiness and rejoice and so on and so forth. These are all things with positive message. We want to start the week with a siman, just like we start the Rosh Hashanah with simanim to be simana milta. We want to start the week also on a positive note, on the right foot, so to speak. When you say Havdalah, you want to be focused on the cup of wine, on the candles of Havdalah. And we kind of like spill a little bit from the cup of wine. The minhag is that you spill it and you turn off the flame of the Havdalah candle with it. But the reason is not just practical reason to spill the wine in order to have some liquid to turn off the candle, but we want the spill of the wine because that is considered a siman bracha as well. First of all, you do it, says the Ramah, that the kos should not be pagum, and the reason that we pour it is the amrinan kol bayit shelo nishpach bo yain kamayim em bo siman bracha. It's a siman bracha when wine is spilling and the bracha is fulfilled when things are overly full and kind of like pouring out a fullness. That is considered a siman bracha. So therefore you'll find many people, the way they spill it is not just spilling the wine, but rather they overly fill up the cup that from fullness it overflows. And that's like, again, these are simanim that we do. Just like Rosh Hashanah, you do simanim, because simana miltahi, here also we start the week with good omens, so to speak, of simanim that are positive and indicate bracha and simcha, the blessing and happiness and so on. So says the Ramah, this is what we do in the beginning of the Shavua as a good omen. Also pour from the cup of Havdalah, from the cup of wine. Says the Ramah, le'achar Havdalah, after Havdalah, umechabin bo anir, and you turn off the candles with that. Ve'rochatzim bo einav mishum chibub mitzvah, and they even when people put it, they show their love of mitzvot by using it as putting it in their eyes and so on, which again has deeper meanings over here as well. But nevertheless, says the Mishna Berura over here, the poskim say that in time of the bracha you should not be pouring anything from the cup, but you do it in the beginning when you overly fill it up, or afterwards after the bracha. Again, you have to be careful, and Chacham Obadia says this as well, that you don't want to lose too much wine, because that's also waste of resources, so to speak, is the isur of Baal Tashchit, and is not necessarily something positive. Says the Mishna Berura, the drinking of the wine should be sitting down. The en shotin me'umad l'chatchila. Any drinking you want to do as a part of halachot derech eretz that the person does sitting. Na'agu anashim shelo lishtot mikos havdalah. Some women have a minhag not to drink from the cup of havdalah, and the reason for that is discussed in the poskim, because not because of what people tell you, which is like funny and baseless, but but it's because the Etz Hadat was perhaps the wine, a grape was the fruit of Etz Hadat, and therefore, because of the chet of Adam HaRishon and Chava with wine, was given to her the concept of Dam Nidut, as the Gemara discusses in Masechet Ketubot Daf Yud, is discussed over there, and Shlach Kadosh over here discusses that the Havdalah that was done between Adam and Chava through Dam Nidut was caused because of and through Etz Hadat, which was wine, and hence you kind of stay away from drinking the wine of Havdalah, to remember that issue of the tikkun of its chet of Etz Hadat. Now, Rabbi Zalman Mercer writes that the reason that the wives, the women, do not drink from the kos of Havdalah, from the cup of wine, is because there is a shita in halachic opinion that women are patur from Havdalah, and the amen that they answer at the end of the bracha of Havdalah would be a hefsek between the bracha of Borei Pri Gefen and drinking from the kos hayayin, and therefore it would be a problem. That's something that's brought in by Chacham Obadia and Chazon Obadiah in Ilchot Chanukah, actually in the Chazon Obadiah Chanukah, that he discusses this in some length over there. Fascinating insight and a beautiful message with it. So that's certainly something to think about as well. Says the Shulchan Aruch of the Mishna Berura, Ragila mavdil lishtot kulo. So if you have kos shel Havdalah, Ragila mavdil lishtot kulo, ve'eno mashke mimenu b'nei beto. Unlike kiddush that you drink and then you give to everyone else drink, on Havdalah you drink the whole thing. That's the minhag. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, if you can't do it, it's sufficient to do a melo lugmav. You don't even have to do a revi'it of wine. A melo lugmav, a cheekful, which is a majority of revi'it, would be sufficient, and that would be for someone, especially if you're doing it on wine. Many people want bedavka to have wine as a skula on Motzei Shabbat, not grape juice. So if that's going to hurt your stomach, or you don't want to fall asleep or whatnot, then you don't have to do more than what's necessary, which would be melo lugmav. And that basically concludes Seif Aleph of Siman Shadiva. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will be continuing the next Seif in the days to come. Hazaku Baruch.